The message on my phone screen made my blood run cold. Amanda Green requests an emergency meeting regarding estate division. Attend or lose everything. I stood frozen in front of my childhood home, the place where my mother had drawn her last breath just 6 months ago, and felt rage bubbling up from somewhere deep inside me. My younger sister, the one who had vanished while our mother fought stage 4 cancer, the one who couldn't be bothered to sit by her bedside during those agonizing final days, was now circling like a vulture over what remained of Mom's legacy. My hands trembled as I clutched the phone. The lawyer's tone had been cold clinical, as if he were discussing a business transaction rather than the remains of a woman's life. Amanda wanted an emergency meeting. Of course she did. She hadn't wanted an emergency visit when Mom was crying out in pain at 3 in the morning. She hadn't considered it urgent when the medical bills started piling up like a mountain of unpayable debt. But now that there was money to be claimed, suddenly everything was urgent. Before we dive deeper into this nightmare, if you're enjoying this story about standing up against family betrayal and fighting for what's right, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of justice and redemption. Your support means everything, and I love reading your comments about your own experiences. Now let me take you back to where this all began, because you need to understand how I got to this breaking point. Let me start from the beginning, when life still made sense, when I still believed that family meant something. My name is Michaela Thompson, and I'm 32 years old. I worked as a hospital administrator at St. Catherine's Medical Center in downtown Boston. I had built a solid career over the past decade, climbing from an entry-level position to managing an entire department. I was proud of what I had accomplished. My mother, Sarah Green, had been my biggest cheerleader, always telling me how she wished she'd had the opportunities I had. Mom had raised Amanda and me on her own after Dad left when I was 12. She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed, clothed, and in a decent school district. She never complained, never made us feel like burdens, even though I now realize how exhausted she must have been. I was the older sister, responsible and driven, always trying to make Mom's sacrifices worth something. Amanda was different. 5 years younger than me, she was the baby, the one who could do no wrong in Mom's eyes. While I studied late into the night and worked part-time jobs through college, Amanda drifted through community college, more interested in parties and Instagram followers than building a future. I tried not to resent it. I really did. Mom would say that Amanda just needed more time to find herself, that everyone matured at their own pace. So I bit my tongue when Amanda dropped out of college for the 3rd time. I stayed silent when Mom paid off Amanda's credit card debts again and again. I convinced myself that this was what family did, that my role was to be the stable one, the rock that everyone could lean on. When I was 28, I met David Thompson at a hospital fundraiser. He was working security for the event, and we struck up a conversation during a quiet moment. David was a former police detective who had left the force to start his own private investigation firm. He was smart, kind, and had this way of seeing through people's facades that both intimidated and fascinated me. We were married within a year, and he became not just my husband, but my best friend, my partner in every sense of the word. Mom adored David. She used to joke that he was the son she never had. He was patient with Amanda's drama, supportive of Mom's health concerns, and always ready to help with whatever our little family needed. When Mom started feeling sick about 2 years ago, David was the one who insisted she see a specialist. He drove her to appointments when I couldn't get away from work. He researched treatment options and helped navigate the nightmare of insurance paperwork. The diagnosis came on a gray Tuesday afternoon in March. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. The doctor's words seemed to echo in the small consultation room, bouncing off the walls and hammering into my skull. Advanced. Aggressive. Limited options. Mom sat there, her face pale but composed, nodding as the oncologist explained treatment protocols. I wanted to scream, to demand that they fix this, to rage against the unfairness of it all. But I just held Mom's hand and took notes, because that's what I did. I was the responsible one. I called Amanda immediately after the appointment. She was in Miami for a bachelorette party. I'll never forget her response. "Oh my God, that's terrible. Listen, I'm in the middle of something. Can I call you back?" She didn't call back. Not that day, not that week. When she finally returned my calls, she was full of excuses and promises. She'd visit soon, she said. She just needed to figure some things out first. She had a new boyfriend, Tyler something, and they were getting serious. Surely I understood. The chemotherapy started 2 weeks later. Mom was determined to fight, even though the odds were stacked against her. I took family leave from work and David adjusted his schedule, so one of us was always with her. We moved Mom into our spare bedroom because she couldn't manage the stairs in her own house anymore. The treatment was brutal. Mom's thick brown hair fell out in clumps. Her skin took on a grayish tone. She lost 50 pounds in 3 months. Some days she couldn't keep down water, let alone food. But she never complained. She'd smile weakly and tell me she was fine, that I should go back to work, that she didn't want to be a burden. Amanda visited twice during those 6 months of treatment. Twice. The first time she stayed for 3 hours, spent most of it on her phone, and left saying she had dinner plans she couldn't break. The second visit was worse. She brought Tyler, a slick-talking guy with expensive clothes and shifty eyes that never quite met yours when he spoke. They stayed for an hour. Amanda took a few selfies with Mom, posted them on social media with captions about staying strong in family bonds, then claimed Tyler had an important business meeting. I watched from the doorway as they climbed into Tyler's BMW and drove away, Amanda already laughing at something on her phone. Mom made excuses for her. Amanda's young, she's finding her way, she doesn't know how to handle this kind of situation. I wanted to shout that Amanda was 27 years old, that being young didn't excuse cruelty, that there was no excuse for abandoning your dying mother. But I didn't. I swallowed my anger and changed Mom's bedsheets and measured out her medications and pretended that everything was fine. The medical bills were catastrophic. Even with insurance, the costs mounted into 6 figures. Experimental treatments. Medications not covered by our plan. Special dietary supplements. Home nursing care for the days when neither David nor I could be there. I took out a loan against our house. I maxed out 2 credit cards. David's business took a hit because he was turning down clients to be home more. We were drowning financially, but I told myself it was worth it if it gave Mom more time. In September, Mom's condition deteriorated rapidly. The cancer had spread to her liver and lungs. Her oncologist gently suggested we consider hospice care. We had weeks left, maybe a month. I remember collapsing in David's arms in the hospital parking lot, finally letting myself sob. We brought Mom home and set up hospice services. I called Amanda and told her this was it, that if she wanted to say goodbye, she needed to come now. She came, but not alone. She brought Tyler and a lawyer. His name was Jack Peterson, and he had an expensive suit and a briefcase full of documents. I was in the kitchen preparing Mom's medications when I heard voices from her room. Angry voices. I rushed in to find Amanda standing over Mom's bed, waving papers in her face. Mom looked terrified, confused. She'd been heavily medicated for pain, barely lucid most days. Amanda was shouting something about Mom's will, about fairness, about how Amanda deserved her share. I lost it. I physically pushed Amanda away from the bed and told her to get out. We had a screaming match right there in the hallway, while Mom cried weakly from her room. Amanda accused me of trying to steal the inheritance, of manipulating Mom, of being a controlling bitch who thought she was better than everyone else. Jack Peterson stood there, taking notes like he was documenting a crime scene. Tyler just looked uncomfortable and checked his watch. I told them all to get out, that they were not welcome in my house. Amanda left, but not before screaming that I'd regret this, that she'd make sure I got what was coming to me. Mom died 3 days later on a quiet Sunday morning. I was holding her hand. David was there too. It was peaceful as death can be. Her last words to me were barely a whisper. Take care of things, sweetheart. Don't let greed destroy what we built. Protect each other. I promised her I would. I didn't understand then what she was warning me about. The funeral was a nightmare. Amanda showed up in an expensive black dress. I knew she couldn't afford playing the grieving daughter for the cameras. And yes, there were cameras because she'd apparently contacted local media about the tragic loss of our beloved mother. She posted constant updates on social media, sharing photos of Mom from happier times, writing long captions about loss and family and memories. People who didn't know better commented about what a devoted daughter she was. I wanted to vomit. After the funeral, things got worse. Mom's will was clear. She divided her estate equally between Amanda and me, with provisions that debts and final expenses were to be paid first before any distribution. The estate consisted of her house, some savings, and a small life insurance policy. After the medical bills and funeral costs, there wasn't much left, maybe $150,000 total. It wasn't a fortune, but it was Mom's legacy, the product of her lifetime of hard work and sacrifice. Amanda wanted her share immediately. She called me 3 days after the funeral, her voice cold and demanding. Tyler's planning this huge wedding, and I need $50,000 by next month. The house can be sold, the life insurance is already paid out, just write me a check. I explained as calmly as I could that it didn't work that way. There were taxes, outstanding debts, legal fees, the probate process. It would take time. She hung up on me. Then came the letter from Jack Peterson's law office. Amanda was contesting the will. She claimed I had unduly influenced Mom during her illness, that the will didn't reflect Mom's true wishes, that she was entitled to 75% of the estate because she'd been Mom's favorite. I stared at that letter in disbelief. Mom's favorite? The daughter who'd visited twice during 6 months of agony, the one who'd tried to bully a dying woman into changing her will? I hired Gary Patterson, an estate attorney recommended by a colleague. Gary was in his 60s with kind eyes and a reputation for being thorough. He reviewed everything and assured me that Amanda's claim was baseless. Mom's will had been properly executed years before her illness. There was no evidence of undue influence. We'd fight this and win. But he warned me it would get ugly. Family disputes always did. Ugly didn't begin to cover it. 2 weeks after I received Jack Peterson's letter, Amanda launched a social media campaign against me. She posted photos of Mom from the hospice period, images I didn't even know existed. Someone had digitally altered them, adding bruises, making Mom look worse than she had. The captions were poison. My sister refused to let me see our mother during her final days. She isolated Mom and controlled every aspect of her care. I suspect elder abuse but can't prove it yet. My heart is broken. The posts went viral. Suddenly, I was getting death threats in my email. Strangers were commenting on my own social media pages, calling me a monster, a murderer, a thief. Someone found my work information and started calling the hospital, making complaints, demanding I be fired. I had to make my accounts private, then delete them entirely. It didn't help. The harassment continued. My boss, Dr. Patricia Connors, called me into her office on a Tuesday morning. I knew from her expression what was coming. Michaela, I'm so sorry, but the board has decided we need to put you on administrative leave until this situation is resolved. The negative publicity is affecting the hospital's reputation. Patients are requesting different administrators. We'll keep you on payroll, but you can't be here right now. I was devastated. I'd built my career at Street Catherine's. I'd given them 10 years of dedicated service. And now, because of Amanda's lies, I was being pushed out. David's business suffered too. 3 major clients canceled their contracts, citing concerns about association with controversy. Someone left a dead rat on the doorstep of his office with a note that said, "Thieves and abusers get what they deserve." We had to hire someone to scrub the worst of the online content, but it was like trying to stop a flood with a teaspoon. For every post we got taken down, 5 more appeared. We sold David's truck to make our mortgage payment. We started shopping at discount grocery stores, buying generic brands, cutting out everything non-essential. The stress was crushing. I started having panic attacks, waking up at 3 in the morning with my heart racing and my mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. David held me through those dark nights, promising we'd get through this, that the truth would come out. I wanted to believe him. Then the threats escalated. We started getting calls on our home phone, always from blocked numbers. Angry voices, sometimes male, sometimes female, telling us they knew where we lived, that we'd pay for what we'd done. Someone slashed the tires on my car. Another time we came home to find our front window shattered a brick with the word thief spray painted on it, lying in our living room. I called the police, but they said without evidence of who was responsible, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested we install security cameras, which we couldn't afford. The legal battle dragged on. Jack Peterson filed motion after motion, each one more outrageous than the last. He claimed I'd forged Mom's signature on medical documents. He alleged I'd stolen money from her accounts. He even suggested I'd deliberately given Mom wrong medications to hasten her death. Every accusation was investigated and dismissed, but each one cost us money in legal fees and took a toll on my mental health. Gary assured me this was a war of attrition, that Jack was hoping to exhaust our resources until we'd settle for less than we deserved. During one particularly brutal deposition, Jack Peterson went after every aspect of my character. He twisted my devotion to Mom into something sinister. The fact that I'd moved her into our home became proof that I'd isolated her. My management of her medications became evidence of potential abuse. My handling of her finances became proof of theft. Amanda sat there through it all, nodding along her face, a mask of false sorrow. When it was her turn to speak, she lied through her teeth. She claimed she'd tried to visit Mom constantly, but I'd turned her away. She said Mom had told her she was afraid of me. She wept for the cameras and talked about how she just wanted justice for her mother. I don't think I've ever felt so helpless. The truth didn't seem to matter. Amanda's lies were more compelling than my facts. Her tears were more convincing than my documentation. The court system was slow, and public opinion had already convicted me. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid us. We became pariahs in our own community. David refused to give up. During his years as a detective, he'd built up a network of contacts, people who owed him favors, professionals who respected his work. He started investigating Amanda and Tyler quietly on his own time, using his own resources. He sensed there was more to this than just a greedy sister wanting money. The ferocity of Amanda's attack, the involvement of Jack Peterson, Tyler's sudden appearance in Amanda's life, it all felt coordinated, planned. His first breakthrough came when he looked into Mom's medical insurance. The bills we'd received were astronomical, far higher than they should have been even without insurance. When David pulled Mom's insurance records, he discovered something shocking. Her policy had been canceled 8 months before she died, right around the time her treatment became most intensive. Someone had called the insurance company claiming to be Mom and requested cancellation. The representative had noted in the file that the caller seemed confused and mentioned that the policyholder was dying anyway and wanted to save the premium payments. The signature on the cancellation form was forged. It looked like Mom's handwriting, but David had samples of her actual signature from before her illness. The differences were subtle but definite. Someone had practiced Mom's signature and gotten good enough to fool a cursory inspection. When David tracked down the phone number used to make the initial cancellation call, it led to a prepaid cell phone purchased at a convenience store in Miami. The store's security footage from that date showed Amanda buying the phone. She'd done it. My own sister had deliberately canceled our dying mother's health insurance, condemning us to hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, all so she could pocket the premium money Mom had been paying. I felt sick when David showed me the evidence. How could anyone be that cruel? That calculating? Mom had been suffering dying, and Amanda had seen it as an opportunity for theft. But David wasn't done. He reached out to an old friend from the force, Frank Martinez, who'd gone into private investigation after retirement. Frank had connections in the financial world, ways of finding information that weren't always strictly by the book but were legal enough. Frank discovered that Tyler Barrett, Amanda's fiancé, was drowning in gambling debts. He owed over $200,000 to some very dangerous people, the kind who didn't send polite reminder notices. Tyler had a history of small-time scams. Credit card fraud. Identity theft. Nothing that had ever stuck in court, but enough to paint a picture of a professional con artist. Frank's contacts in the Miami Police Department confirmed that Tyler was associated with a loan shark operation run by a man named Marcus Vega. Marcus was known for collecting debts through intimidation and violence. Tyler owed Marcus money, and Marcus was done waiting. The pieces started falling into place. Amanda hadn't suddenly become vicious on her own. She'd been recruited, manipulated by Tyler, who'd seen an opportunity in a dying woman's estate. Tyler needed money desperately, and he'd found the perfect mark in Amanda, a spoiled, selfish young woman with an inflated sense of entitlement. He'd probably convinced her that she deserved the money, that I'd stolen it from her, that Mom had always loved her best. And Jack Peterson. Frank found out that Jack wasn't even a real estate lawyer. His law license had been suspended 5 years ago for ethics violations related to defrauding clients. He'd reinvented himself as a legal consultant, operating in a gray area that kept him just on the right side of criminal prosecution. He specialized in estate disputes, convincing vulnerable people that they'd been cheated out of inheritances, then charging enormous fees to pursue baseless claims. He and Tyler had worked together before on similar scams. David's next move was brilliant. He tracked down the hospice nurse who'd cared for Mom during her final weeks. Her name was Susan Jenkins, and she'd left the hospice agency shortly after Mom died, citing personal reasons. David found her working at a nursing home in New Hampshire, living quietly, keeping to herself. It took 3 visits before she agreed to talk to him. She was terrified, David told me later. She kept saying she didn't want trouble, that she'd just been doing her job. But Susan had a conscience. She'd been carrying guilt for months. David convinced her that the right thing to do was tell the truth, that Mom deserved justice. Susan finally agreed to meet with us at a diner halfway between Boston and her town. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept well in months. She kept her hands wrapped around a coffee cup and wouldn't meet my eyes as she spoke. She told us she'd witnessed Amanda and Jack Peterson visit Mom 3 times during the final 2 weeks of her life. I'd been there for 2 of those visits, and both times I'd kicked them out. But there was one visit I didn't know about. I'd gone home to shower and change clothes, and David had run out to pick up prescriptions. Susan had been alone with Mom for about 45 minutes when Amanda and Jack arrived. They'd sent Susan out of the room, claiming they needed private family time. When Susan returned, Mom was crying, distressed, barely conscious. Amanda was holding a piece of paper, and Jack was packing up a portable printer he'd brought with him. They'd forced Mom in her drugged and confused state to sign a handwritten document that Jack claimed was a codicil to her will, giving Amanda 75% of the estate. Susan had known something was wrong, but she'd been afraid to speak up. Jack had threatened her, told her that if she said anything, he'd make sure she lost her nursing license for abandoning her patient. But Susan had done something brave. She'd recorded the entire encounter on her phone, hidden in her pocket. The audio was muffled but audible. You could hear Jack's threatening tone, Amanda's cold demands, Mom's weak protests. Listen, Sarah, this is what's fair. You've always loved me more. You know Michaela has been stealing from you. This just makes things right. Just sign here and we'll leave you alone. Susan also had video from another visit footage she'd taken because she was documenting Mom's decline for medical records. The video showed Amanda going through Mom's purse when Mom was asleep, photographing her driver's license, her credit cards, her bank information. It was clear evidence of identity theft in progress. I broke down when I heard those recordings. The cruelty in Amanda's voice, the fear in Mom's fading responses, it was almost too much to bear. David held me while I sobbed. Susan cried too, apologizing over and over for not coming forward sooner. I told her I didn't blame her, that fear made people do things they regretted. What mattered now was that we had the truth, we had proof, and we were going to make sure Amanda paid for what she'd done. Gary Patterson was ecstatic when we brought him the evidence. This changes everything, he said. This isn't just a civil matter anymore. This is fraud, forgery, elder abuse, identity theft. We need to go to the police immediately. We met with Detective Sarah Williams from the Boston Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. She listened to the recordings, reviewed the documents, and interviewed Susan. She was thorough and professional, and I could see the disgust in her eyes when she heard Amanda's voice on those tapes. Detective Williams opened a criminal investigation. She obtained warrants for Amanda's phone, records her bank accounts, Tyler's financial information, and Jack Peterson's client files. What she found was damning. Amanda had used Mom's identity to open 3 credit cards in the months before Mom died, running up over $30,000 in charges. Tyler had deposited checks meant for Mom's medical care into his own accounts. Jack Peterson had a file cabinet full of similar scams, dozens of families he'd defrauded over the years. But we couldn't just go to trial and hope for the best. Amanda and her accomplices were getting desperate. The threatening phone calls increased. Someone sent me a package containing a dead bird and a note that said, "Next time it'll be your husband." David's office was broken into and several files were stolen. Detective Williams assigned a patrol car to drive by our house periodically, but she admitted they didn't have the resources for full-time protection. That's when Amanda made her final move. She sent me a text message. "Michaela, I'm so sorry for everything that's happened between us. I've been doing a lot of thinking and I realize I've been terrible to you. Can we meet for dinner on Thursday? It's my birthday and I'd really like to try to make amends. Mom would want us to be family again." I stared at that message for a long time. Every instinct I had screamed that it was a trap. David agreed. He showed the message to Detective Williams, who immediately suspected the same thing. They ran surveillance on Amanda and discovered she'd been meeting regularly with Jack Peterson at a restaurant called Castello's, an upscale Italian place downtown. Jack had reserved a private room for Thursday night, the same night Amanda wanted to meet me. Detective Williams pulled the reservation details and found that Jack had specifically requested a room with no security cameras and a separate entrance. We had a decision to make. We could refuse the meeting and stay safe, or we could walk into the trap with our eyes open and try to catch them in the act. It was risky. We didn't know exactly what they were planning, but given their desperation and Tyler's connections to dangerous people, it could be anything from intimidation to actual physical harm. But we also knew this might be our only chance to end this once and for all, to get enough evidence to put them away for a long time. David came up with a plan. He'd been in law enforcement for 15 years before starting his own business. He knew how to set up surveillance, how to handle dangerous situations, how to protect witnesses. He reached out to Mario Castellano, the owner of Castello's. Mario and David had worked together years ago when David was investigating a protection racket targeting local businesses. David had helped put away the men who'd been threatening Mario's family. Mario owed him, and he was happy to help. Mario agreed to let us install hidden cameras and microphones in the private room Amanda had booked. He'd have his most trusted security staff on site positioned discreetly. Detective Williams would be in an unmarked car outside with backup units ready to move in. Gary Patterson would be there as a legal observer. I would wear a wire under my clothes, a tiny transmitter that would broadcast to the receivers David and the detective would be monitoring. The plan was simple. I'd go to the meeting, let them make their move, get them to confess or threaten me on camera, and then the cavalry would arrive. If things got dangerous before that happened, David would intervene immediately. He'd be dressed as a server with full access to the private room. I was terrified, but I was also determined. I'd spent 6 months being victimized by these people. It was time to fight back. Thursday came too quickly. I barely slept the night before. David helped me get ready, checking the wire, making sure my phone's emergency function was activated. He held my face in his hands and looked into my eyes. "You don't have to do this," he said. "We can find another way." But I knew there wasn't another way. This was our shot. I arrived at Costello's at 7 o'clock. The restaurant was busy with the dinner crowd, normal people enjoying normal evenings without any idea of the drama about to unfold. A hostess led me to the private room in the back. I could feel my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. The wire under my blouse felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Amanda was already there, sitting at the head of a long table. She dressed for the occasion, expensive designer clothes and jewelry that definitely hadn't come from her retail job. Jack Peterson sat to her right, looking smug and confident in his suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. And next to him was a man I didn't recognize, tall and muscular, with cold eyes that assessed me like a predator sizing up prey. This had to be Marcus Vega, the loan shark. There was no birthday cake, no celebration, no pretense of sisterly bonding. Amanda's smile was vicious. "Hello, Michaela. Thanks for coming. Please sit down. We have some business to discuss." I sat across from them, keeping my hands visible on the table. I forced myself to appear calm even though my pulse was racing. Jack slid a document across the table. "This is a settlement agreement," he said. "You're going to sign it tonight. It gives Amanda her rightful share of the estate, compensates her for emotional distress, and includes a non-disclosure agreement. You'll never speak publicly about this situation again." I picked up the document and pretended to read it. It was actually a complete transfer of all assets to Amanda, leaving me with nothing. There was also a confession that I'd financially abused Mom and manipulated her during her illness. Signing this would destroy me financially and legally. It would be an admission of crimes I hadn't committed. I'd probably face criminal charges. I looked up at Jack. "This isn't a settlement. This is fraud." Jack's smile never wavered. "Call it what you want. The alternative is much worse. We have evidence that you poisoned your mother, that you deliberately overdosed her on pain medications to hasten her death. We have a witness, a nurse who was there, who'll testify that she saw you do it. The DA's office will have no choice but to prosecute. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison. Or you sign this paper, walk away, and we all move on with our lives." I felt cold fury wash over me. "You're going to blackmail me with lies about murdering my own mother. That's your plan." Amanda leaned forward. "It's not a lie if people believe it," she said. "And they'll believe it. After everything that's already come out, after all the evidence of how controlling you were, how isolated you kept her, the nurse's testimony will be the final nail in your coffin. Just sign the paper, Michaela. Stop being so stubborn. You've already lost." Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice low and menacing. "Or we can do this another way. I know where you and your husband live. I know your daily routines. I know you're all alone with no real friends anymore, no family support, no one who'd really miss you if you disappeared. Accidents happen. Tragic, unfortunate accidents. It would be a shame if something happened to David because you were too proud to do the smart thing. That was the threat we needed on tape. That was the confession that made it all worthwhile." I reached into my purse, slowly, careful not to startle Marcus. Instead of pulling out a pen, I took out my phone and set it on the table. Then I pressed the emergency button 3 times rapidly, the signal for David and Detective Williams to move in. I looked directly at Amanda and smiled. "You know what's funny? I thought family meant something. I thought blood ties were supposed to matter. Mom died believing you loved her. She made excuses for you until her very last breath. and you repaid her by torturing her, by stealing from her, by trying to destroy her other daughter. I just want to understand why. Was it always about the money, or did you really hate me that much?" Amanda's face twisted with rage. "You want to know why? Because you always got everything. You were the smart one, the responsible one, the one Mom was proud of. No matter what I did, it was never enough. I was never enough. You had the perfect life, the perfect marriage, the perfect career. I had nothing. Tyler showed me that I deserved more, that you'd been stealing my share for years. He helped me see that Mom loved you more, that the will wasn't fair, that I had every right to take what should have been mine all along." Jack started to stand up, sensing something was wrong. "Michaela, what did you just do with that phone?" Before I could answer, the door burst open. David came through first, moving fast, followed by Detective Williams and 2 uniformed officers. Gary Patterson was right behind them. The expression on Amanda's face was almost worth everything we'd been through. Almost. Detective Williams held up her badge. "Jack Peterson, Amanda Green, Marcus Vega, you're all under arrest. The charges include fraud, extortion, conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, forgery, and attempted blackmail. You have the right to remain silent." Marcus jumped up and moved toward a side door, but 2 more officers came through that entrance, cutting off his escape. Jack tried to grab the document off the table, but David got there first, snatching it up as evidence. Amanda started screaming. "This is entrapment. You can't do this. Michaela, you bitch, you set me up." Detective Williams cuffed her while reading her rights. Amanda thrashed and cursed, all her poise and manipulation vanishing into raw panic. Jack just looked defeated, like he'd known all along that his luck would eventually run out. Marcus stayed silent, his jaw clenched, already calculating his legal options. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking with adrenaline. David came to my side, immediately wrapping his arm around me. Gary was already on his phone documenting everything for our case. Detective Williams supervised as her officers searched the 3 prisoners and began escorting them out. As Amanda was led past me, she spat at my feet. "I hope you're happy," she hissed. "You've destroyed your own sister. Your own blood." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but pity. "No, Amanda," I said quietly. "You destroyed yourself. I just refused to let you destroy me too. Mom loved you so much. She would have given you anything if you'd just been there for her, if you'd shown her kindness and respect. But you chose this path. You chose greed over family, lies over truth. You did this to yourself." They took them away then, Amanda still screaming threats and accusations, Jack silent and grim, Marcus glaring but saying nothing. Detective Williams stayed behind to take my formal statement and collect the recording equipment. The whole encounter had been captured, video and audio, every threat and confession preserved digitally. It was over. We'd won. The aftermath unfolded like a carefully choreographed play, where justice finally took center stage. Tyler Barrett crumbled first, his facade of confidence shattering the moment he realized Marcus Vega would be sharing a cell block with men who didn't take kindly to gambling debts and betrayal. He sang like a canary, desperate for any deal that would keep him breathing. His testimony painted a portrait of manipulation that went back months before Mom even got sick. He'd spotted Amanda at a nightclub, overheard her complaining about her successful older sister, and saw an opportunity. He'd researched our family, learned about Mom's illness, calculated the potential inheritance down to the dollar. Amanda hadn't been a mastermind. She'd been a mark carefully groomed and weaponized against her own family. The prosecution built their case like architects constructing a cathedral, each piece of evidence another stone in an unshakable foundation. Phone records showed hundreds of calls between Amanda Tyler and Jack Peterson. Bank statements revealed money flowing in complex patterns designed to hide its origins. Text messages laid bare their conspiracy in brutal detail. Tyler admitting he'd pushed Amanda to cancel Mom's insurance. Jack bragging about how easy it was to forge documents when the target was too sick to fight back. Amanda laughing about how naive I was, how I'd never see it coming. I sat through every day of testimony, David beside me, Gary taking meticulous notes. I wanted to witness it all, to hear every lie exposed, every crime documented. I needed to see justice delivered, not for revenge, but for closure, for the certainty that what they'd done had consequences that matched the magnitude of their cruelty. Jack Peterson's conviction came first. 14 counts across multiple cases, a pattern of predation spanning 7 years and 6 states. The prosecutor called him a professional vulture, circling grieving families at their most vulnerable and picking their bones clean. Victims testified, their voices shaking with remembered pain. an elderly man who'd lost everything fighting Jack's fraudulent claims. A woman whose brother's suicide Jack had exploited to steal an entire business. The judge's face grew harder with each story. When she handed down 20 years, Jack finally lost his composure, shouting that he'd done nothing wrong, that estate law was complicated, and people misunderstood his methods. 2 bailiffs escorted him out as he ranted. I felt nothing watching him go. He was a monster, and monsters belonged in cages. Marcus Vega never went to trial. Federal racketeering charges from an unrelated investigation meant he was looking at life without parole before our case even made it to court. He took a plea deal that added our charges to a list so long it took the prosecutor 5 minutes to read it aloud. Tyler's testimony had connected Marcus to a dozen violent crimes, turning what might have been a fraud case into something far more serious. I never saw Marcus again after that night at Costello's, and I was grateful for that small mercy. Amanda's case was the hardest to watch. Her public defender was young Ernest, clearly uncomfortable with the mountain of evidence against his client. He tried to paint Amanda as a victim herself, manipulated by older, more experienced criminals. He brought character witnesses who testified about her difficult childhood, her struggles with self-esteem, her history of bad relationships with controlling men. I listened to people describe a version of Amanda. I barely recognized someone fragile and lost and easily influenced. Part of me wanted to stand up and scream the truth. That Amanda had always been selfish, always been willing to sacrifice anyone for her own gratification, always played the victim when facing consequences for her actions. But another part of me, a quieter part that sounded like Mom's voice in my head, wondered if there was truth in what they said. Had Amanda's selfishness grown from insecurity, I'd been too busy to notice. Had her cruelty been fertilized by my success, making her feel inadequate? I'd never know for sure, and that ambiguity haunted me. The judge wasn't swayed by sympathy. She'd read Susan's testimony, heard the recordings of Amanda threatening Mom, seen the forged documents. Your sister was dying, and you exploited that dying for personal gain, she said, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. You didn't just steal money. You stole her dignity, her peace, her final days. You made her last weeks on Earth a nightmare of confusion and fear. Whatever insecurities drove you, whatever manipulation you experienced, you made a choice. Every time you returned to that house, every time you held papers in front of a dying woman's face, every time you lied to your sister, you chose cruelty. 5 years in prison, 3 before parole eligibility, mandatory psychological treatment, and full restitution of all legal fees and damages. Amanda stood there, shaking, tears streaming down her face as she read her prepared statement. Her voice was barely audible. I'm sorry, Michaela. I'm sorry, Mom. I was wrong. I was sick. I let jealousy poison everything good in my life. I destroyed the people who loved me because I couldn't love myself. I know I can't undo this. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I swear I'll spend the rest of my life trying to become someone worthy of your memory. I sat in the gallery, tears I hadn't expected sliding down my own cheeks. I wasn't crying for Amanda. I was crying for the sister I'd once had. The little girl who'd held my hand on the first day of school, who'd giggled during our late-night conversations, who'd shown flashes of kindness before the darkness consumed. Her. That girl was gone, replaced by this broken woman in an orange jumpsuit. I mourned her loss, even as I accepted the necessity of her punishment. The civil case resolved with clinical efficiency once the criminal convictions were final. The probate court invalidated Jack's forged codicil without hesitation. Gary cited the Slayer statute, a legal principle preventing criminals from profiting from their crimes against the deceased. The judge extended that logic to Amanda's elder abuse and fraud ruling, that her actions constituted such egregious wrongdoing that she'd forfeited any claim to Mom's estate. Everything came to me, though. Everything was far less than it should have been. The legal battle had devoured money like a hungry beast. Gary's fees alone ran into 6 figures, though he'd graciously accepted payment plans. The house sold for $30,000 less than market value because of the stigma attached to it, prospective buyers spooked by the media coverage. Medical bills we'd thought settled suddenly reappeared with late fees and interest. By the time every debt was paid, every obligation met, every expense covered, Mom's lifetime of careful saving amounted to roughly $80,000. It wasn't nothing. It was enough to clear our crushing credit card debt, to repair David's business equipment that we'd been unable to replace, to put a small cushion in our savings account for the first time in 2 years. But more than the money, the vindication felt like oxygen after years of suffocation. Street. Catherine's hospital didn't just offer me my job back. Doctor. Connors called me personally to apologize, explaining that the board had acted hastily out of fear and wanted to make amends. They offered me my previous position with a 15% raise and a formal letter of apology placed in my personnel file. I accepted not because I'd forgotten their abandonment, but because I needed to work, needed purpose, needed to prove that Amanda's lies hadn't destroyed my career permanently. David's business recovery was slower but steady. The publicity from exposing a major fraud ring brought unexpected attention. News articles detailed his investigative work. Legal blogs analyzed his methods. 3 law firms reached out asking if he'd consider contract work on complex cases. Corporate clients who valued discretion and competence started calling. Within 6 months, his client list was healthier than it had been before the nightmare began. He hired an assistant, rented a proper office, started turning down cases because he was too busy rather than too desperate. But we both knew the real victory wasn't financial or professional. The real victory was staring at our reflections in the mirror and recognizing ourselves again. For 2 years, we'd been people shaped by fear, by anger, by the constant weight of injustice pressing down on our shoulders. Now slowly, we were remembering how to breathe without that weight, how to make plans that extended beyond the next legal deadline, how to laugh without it feeling like betrayal of our suffering. I took $20,000 from Mom's estate and established the Sarah Green Memorial Scholarship Fund through our local community college's foundation. The fund would provide full tuition and books for 2 nursing students annually, with preference given to those specializing in palliative and hospice care. I worked with the college to design the selection criteria, insisting that recipients demonstrate not just academic excellence but genuine compassion, the kind of empathy Mom had valued above everything else. The first scholarship ceremony took place on a bright May morning in the college's auditorium. I sat in the front row, David's hand warm in mine as the dean announced the recipients. The first was a single mother returning to school after 20 years, her dream of becoming a nurse delayed by life's demands. The second was a young man who'd cared for his grandfather through Alzheimer's and wanted to help other families navigate that devastating journey. The third recipient made my breath catch. Emily Jenkins, daughter of Susan Jenkins, following in her mother's footsteps to become a hospice nurse. Susan was there sitting 3 rows behind us. We'd stayed in touch through emails and occasional phone calls, our shared trauma, creating a bond neither of us had expected. After the ceremony, we embraced, both of us crying happy tears this time. "Your mother would be so proud," Susan whispered. "Not just of the scholarship, but of you. Of how you fought for her. Of who you've become." I held her tighter, grateful for her courage, grateful she'd chosen truth over fear when it mattered most. Life shifted into a new rhythm, not the old normal, but something different, something earned through fire. David and I sold our house, unable to shake the ghosts that lingered in its corners. Every room held memories of Mom's suffering, of our desperate fears, of the nights we'd held each other and wondered if we'd survive this. We found a smaller place across town, a 1,920 bungalow with original hardwood floors, and a backyard garden that previous owners had loved into abundance. I spent weekend mornings there, hands in the soil, planting vegetables and flowers, feeling connected to growing things to life, asserting itself stubbornly against death and darkness. I took up painting, something I'd always dismissed as impractical when there were bills to pay and responsibilities to manage. I wasn't talented, my landscapes more enthusiastic than skilled, but the act of creating something from nothing felt healing in ways I couldn't articulate. David would find me in our spare bedroom turned studio, paint smeared on my hands and music playing, lost in the meditation of color and form. He'd kiss the top of my head and leave me to it, understanding I needed this space to process everything we'd endured. Then came the morning 4 months ago when I woke feeling different. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle shift in my body, an awareness I couldn't quite name. I took a pregnancy test on a whim, expecting nothing. David and I had tried for 3 years without success, had resigned ourselves to the possibility that children might not be in our future. The stress of Mom's illness and the legal nightmare had made conception seem impossible, our bodies too traumatized for new life. The positive result appeared like magic, 2 pink lines that made me sit down hard on the bathroom floor. I called David at work, unable to wait, unable to contain the joy and terror and hope flooding through me. He came home immediately, held the test in shaking hands, pulled me into his arms and laughed and cried and said Mom's name over and over like a prayer of gratitude. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, my body apparently ready to nurture life after so much exposure to death. We decorated the nursery in soft yellows and greens, gender neutral, because we wanted to be surprised. David assembled furniture with the focused intensity he brought to complex investigations. I washed tiny clothes and folded them into drawers, marveling at how something so small could represent such enormous hope. We decided on names early. Sarah for a girl after Mom. Samuel for a boy after David's father who'd passed when David was young. Either way, our child would carry forward the legacy of people who'd loved fiercely and lived with integrity. The due date landed in December, a winter baby arriving as the year died, and renewed itself, the symbolism too perfect to ignore. At 7 months pregnant, my belly round and the baby active, I finally felt ready to visit Mom's grave. I'd avoided the cemetery since the funeral, unable to face that final proof of her absence. But now, with new life growing inside me, with justice served and a future taking shape, I needed to tell her everything. David drove me there on a Sunday afternoon in October. The cemetery sprawled across rolling hills, old trees blazing with autumn colors, the air crisp with the promise of coming winter. Mom's grave was in a newer section, the grass still thin over the disturbed earth, her headstone simple granite with her name, dates, and the words beloved, mother, and friend. I'd brought white roses, Mom's favorites, and spent several minutes arranging them in the built-in vase, needing the task to steady myself. Then I sat on the grass beside her, one hand on my belly, and talked. I told her about the trial, about Amanda's conviction, about Jack and Marcus getting what they deserved. I described the scholarship fund, how her name would help students for generations, how her legacy was kindness, not cruelty. I told her about the baby, about our plans and fears and hopes, about how desperately I wished she could meet her grandchild. Mom, I whispered, my voice breaking, I need you to know I did everything I could. I protected what you built. I fought for your memory. I didn't let them win. I hope that's enough. I hope you'd be proud. I hope you're at peace now. I was crying when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned expecting David but found Amanda instead. The shock of seeing her paralyzed me for a moment. She'd been released early. I'd known that the lawyer had sent a notification months ago. But knowing intellectually that she was free and seeing her in person were devastatingly different experiences. She looked like a shadow of herself. Prison had stripped away the designer clothes and carefully styled hair, leaving someone older, worn, humbled by consequences. She'd lost weight, her cheeks hollow, dark circles under her eyes, testifying to sleepless nights. She wore simple jeans and a sweatshirt carried a small potted plant, a camellia with delicate pink blooms. Mom's favorite flower. We stared at each other across the grave, years of love and betrayal and pain swirling in the space between us. Amanda's hands shook as she held the plant. I didn't know if you'd be here, she said quietly. I've come every Sunday since I got out. I talk to her. I tell her I'm sorry. I know she can't hear me, but I need to say it anyway. I should have left. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to stand up, to walk away, to refuse to share this sacred space with the person who desecrated it. But something kept me rooted there, maybe Mom's voice in my memory talking about forgiveness, maybe exhaustion from carrying hatred for so long, maybe just curiosity about who Amanda had become. I stayed. Amanda knelt, slowly placed the camellia beside my roses. Her hands lingered on the plant for a moment, trembling. I'm sorry, Michaela, she said without looking at me. I know that's inadequate. I know those words can't repair what I destroyed. But I need you to hear them anyway. I was wrong. Not just wrong, evil. I let my jealousy become poison. I let Tyler convince me that you were my enemy when you were the only one who'd ever consistently loved me. I tortured our mother when she was dying because I was too consumed by greed and resentment to see how precious little time we had left with her. Tears dripped off her chin onto Mom's headstone. I've had 2 years to think about what I did. 2 years in a cell with nothing but my memories and guilt. The therapy they made me do forced me to confront things I'd been running from my whole life. How I always felt second best. How I translated Mom's pride in your accomplishments into proof she loved me less. How I built an identity around being the victim, when really I was just too lazy and scared to build my own life. Tyler didn't create my jealousy, Michaela. He just knew how to weaponize what was already there. She finally looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. I can't ask you to forgive me. I don't deserve that, but I wanted you to know I'm trying to become someone different. Someone who might eventually deserve to share a name with you and Mom. I'm working, paying restitution $1 at a time. I'm in therapy twice a week. I volunteer at a nursing home, helping care for patients the way I should have helped care for Mom. I'll never stop being sorry, and I'll never stop trying to earn redemption, even if I never actually achieve it. I looked at my sister, this woman who'd caused me such anguish, who'd attacked me when I was most vulnerable, who'd desecrated our mother's final days. I wanted to feel the rage that had sustained me through the darkest times. I wanted to unleash the words I'd rehearsed in my head, the verbal evisceration she deserved. But sitting there, 7 months pregnant with my hand on my belly, I felt only profound sadness for all we'd lost and could never reclaim. "I'm pregnant," I said finally. "Due in December. It's a girl. We're naming her Sarah." Amanda's face crumpled. She pressed a hand to her mouth, new tears flowing. "Oh God," she breathed. "Mom would have loved that. She would have been so happy to be a grandmother." "I'm so glad, Michaela. I'm so glad you're getting this joy. You deserve every bit of happiness in the world. You're going to be an amazing mother." The words sounded genuine, stripped of the manipulation that used to coat Amanda's voice like oil. Maybe prison had changed her. Maybe she'd finally hit bottom hard enough to shatter her old patterns. Maybe she was still performing, saying what she thought I wanted to hear. I didn't know, and I realized I didn't need to know with certainty. "Things will never be what they were," I said, slowly choosing each word carefully. "I can't trust you, Amanda. Maybe I never will. You hurt me in ways I'm still processing, and you hurt Mom in ways that can never be forgiven. But I also know that carrying this hatred is exhausting, and I don't want my daughter born into a world shaped by bitterness. Mom would want us to try eventually to find some kind of peace. Not reconciliation, not necessarily. Not sisterly closeness. But maybe acceptance that we're both human, both flawed, both trying to be better than we've been. Not now. Not for a long time. But someday maybe there's a path forward that doesn't require me to destroy myself by hating you forever." Amanda nodded, crying openly now. "Thank you," she whispered. "That's more than I deserve. Take care of yourself and that baby. Tell her about Mom. Tell her the good stories, the ones from before everything went wrong. Tell her that her grandmother was strong and kind, and that she sacrificed everything to give her daughters a better life. Tell her the truth, even the painful parts, so she learns that families are complicated and love doesn't always look like we expect it to." "I will," I promised. "And Amanda, if you're serious about changing, prove it through your actions. Not to me, but to yourself. Build a life that honors Mom's memory by being the person she hoped you could become." Amanda stood slowly, wiped her face with her sleeves. "I'm trying," she said. "Every single day I'm trying." Then she walked away, her stride still carrying the slight shuffle of someone not quite readjusted to freedom, her shoulders hunched against invisible weight. I watched her go and felt something loosen in my chest, not forgiveness exactly, but the beginning of release, permission to stop letting her choices define my emotional landscape. David appeared moments later, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He'd been waiting in the parking lot, giving me space, but staying close enough to come if needed. He sat beside me, handed me decaf, wrapped his arm around my shoulders. I leaned into his warmth, exhausted and light simultaneously. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle with concern. I nodded against his shoulder. "Better than okay. For the first time in forever, I feel like I can breathe all the way in and out. Like the story finally has an ending and I get to write the next chapter without all this weight." We sat there until the sun started setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. My hand rested on my pregnant belly, feeling Sarah kick and roll, responding to my voice or David's touch or her own mysterious internal rhythms. This tiny person growing inside me represented possibility, the chance to break cycles of pain and create something better, something whole and healthy and full of love without conditions. That night, David and I sat on our back porch, wrapped in blankets against the October chill. The garden was preparing for winter, some plants dying back while others settled in for dormancy. Life and death existing side by side, each making space for the other, neither permanent but both necessary. "Mom would be proud of you," David said softly. "Of us. Of how we fought for what was right without losing ourselves in the process. That took real strength, real character. And Sarah's going to grow up knowing that her mother is someone who stands up for justice, who protects the vulnerable, who doesn't back down when things get hard." I thought about everything we'd survived. The betrayal that had felt like drowning. The lies that had poisoned our reputation. The financial devastation that had nearly destroyed us. The terror of threats and harassment and isolation. And I thought about everything we'd overcome. The investigation that exposed the truth. The confrontation that brought justice. The legal victories that vindicated Mom's memory. The slow rebuilding of our lives into something even stronger than before. We won because we refused to let hatred consume us, I said, my voice thoughtful. We could have become bitter, vengeful, eaten alive by anger. Instead, we stayed focused on truth and justice. We didn't fight to hurt Amanda, we fought to honor Mom. That's what made the difference. David kissed my temple. That's who you are, Michaela. That's who you've always been. Someone who leads with integrity even when cruelty would be easier. Someone who protects others even when it costs you. Someone who builds when others tear down. Sarah's going to learn from watching you that strength isn't about dominating others, it's about maintaining your values when everything tries to compromise them. We sat there until stars appeared, tiny points of light pushing back against darkness, each one insignificant alone but together creating something vast and beautiful. I felt Sarah moving inside me, this new life, preparing to enter a world that was still complicated and sometimes cruel, but also full of people who fought for goodness, who chose compassion, who refused to let pain turn them into the thing they'd suffered from. Mom, I thought, sending the words out into the universe like a prayer, I'm going to teach Sarah everything you taught me. About sacrifice and love. About standing up for what's right even when it's hard. About being strong enough to show kindness and brave enough to set boundaries. About protecting the vulnerable and honoring those who came before us. Your legacy doesn't end with me. It continues through her, through every life touched by your scholarship fund, through every family that benefits from the truth we fought to expose. You're not gone, Mom. You're multiplied. The baby kicked hard under my hand, as if agreeing, as if understanding somehow that she was part of something larger than one lifetime, connected to a grandmother she'd never meet, but whose love would shape her existence. Nonetheless, that night, David and I sat on our back porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. My hand rested on my growing belly, feeling the life moving inside me. David held my other hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my skin. Mom would be proud of you, he said. You fought for what was right. You didn't let them break you. You protected what she built and turned it into something even more meaningful. That takes real strength. I thought about everything we'd endured. The betrayal, the lies, the financial ruin, the public humiliation, the threats and fear, and I thought about everything we'd overcome. The investigation, the confrontation, the victory, the healing. In the end, we'd won not because we were ruthless or vengeful, but because we'd stood firm on truth and refused to be intimidated into silence. We'd won because we'd fought not for revenge, but for justice, not to hurt Amanda, but to protect Mom's memory and our own future. Here's what I learned from this nightmare. Family doesn't mean accepting abuse. Blood relation doesn't give anyone the right to exploit or manipulate you. Sometimes the people who share your DNA are the ones who hurt you most deeply. And sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is stand up to someone you love and say no more. Not because you hate them, but because you value yourself enough to refuse to be their victim. I also learned that healing is possible, but it's not linear. There are still days when I wake up angry when I see something that reminds me of Mom's suffering, and I want to scream at the unfairness of it all. There are moments when I wonder if I should have done something differently, if I could have saved Amanda from her own worst impulses, if I'm somehow responsible for her downfall. But then I remember that I didn't make her choices. I didn't force her to steal, to forge, to abuse a dying woman. She did those things. And while I hope she finds redemption, her journey is hers alone to walk. Your family should be your safe place, your support system, the people who celebrate your victories and comfort you in defeat. When they become your tormentors instead, you have every right to protect yourself. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. Demanding respect isn't cruel. Fighting for what's rightfully yours isn't greedy. These are acts of self-preservation, of self-love, of claiming your right to a life free from abuse. So here's my question for you if you've made it this far in my story. Have you ever had to stand up to someone in your family who was treating you unfairly? Did you stay and fight or walk away? How did you find the strength to choose yourself when everything in your upbringing told you to sacrifice and endure? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you're currently in a situation where someone is exploiting your kindness, stealing your resources, or making you feel guilty for setting boundaries, please know that you deserve better. You deserve respect. You deserve honesty. You deserve to be treated with basic human decency. Don't let anyone convince you that family loyalty means accepting abuse. It doesn't. If this story resonated with you, if it gave you strength or hope, or just made you feel less alone in your own struggles, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share your experiences in the comments. Let's build a community of people who refuse to be victims, who fight for justice, who protect what matters. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who need to hear them, who need to know that standing up for yourself is not only okay but necessary. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for caring enough to read to the end. And remember, your worth is not determined by how much you sacrifice or how much abuse you can endure. Your worth is inherent. You matter. Your truth matters. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply refuse to be silenced.